simple woman said to the dying billionaire CEO, "Sir, I have the cure to your illness." He sat slouched in the grand leather chair, breathing heavily, while she, a caramel-skinned woman with warm brown eyes, walked into his office, quietly holding the secret that could save him. If you held the power to save someone who had everything but still felt empty, would you do it? Let me know in the comments. There's something profoundly beautiful about the simplest acts of kindness. In a world obsessed with wealth, fame, and status, it's easy to forget that sometimes salvation comes not from a high-profile doctor, a political leader, or a multi-billion-dollar deal, but from an ordinary soul with extraordinary compassion. This story today is about faith, humility, and unexpected love. It's about how a billionaire, drowning in loneliness and regret, found his second chance in the most unlikely place: the hands of a caramel-skinned woman who lived a humble life but carried a healing gift within her. This is not just a love story. It's a story of forgiveness, redemption, and miracles that money could never buy. Thank you for clicking on this story today. You're part of a growing community that believes in hope, kindness, and the unseen battles we all face. Welcome back to the channel, my beautiful story family. Before we begin, I would be glad to know that these lessons get to people in different parts of the world. So please let me know where you're watching from. Thank you for joining this beautiful, growing family. Let us begin. The boardroom of Hayes Global was a fortress of glass and steel, its long mahogany table gleaming under the morning sun. Colton Hayes sat at its head, his tailored suit sharp but his face pale, his breathing labored. At 33, he was a billionaire CEO, his tech empire built from a single coding project in a dorm room. His dark hair was tousled, his green eyes sharp, despite the exhaustion etched into his features. 6 months ago, doctors had diagnosed him with a rare heart condition. 6 months to live, they'd said, and today the board was circling like vultures. Blaine Rivers, the silver-haired chairman, leaned forward, his voice smooth but edged with ambition. "Colton, you've done remarkable things, but your health is concerning. Step down. Let us secure the company's future." The room, 10 executives in pristine suits, nodded, their faces a mix of pity and opportunism. Colton's jaw tightened, his hands gripping the chair's arms. He'd built this empire from nothing, coded through nights when others slept, outmaneuvered rivals with sheer will. Surrender wasn't in his blood. "I built this empire from nothing," he said, his voice low, defiant. "I won't be buried before I'm dead." Blaine's eyes narrowed, but he leaned back, a faint smile playing on his lips. "We're only thinking of the company, Colton. You're not yourself." "Not myself?" Colton stood, ignoring the dizziness that flared. "I'm the one who turned a startup into a global name. You want my seat, Blaine? Earn it." The room tensed, murmurs rippling. April Matthews, Colton's private nurse, stood discreetly by the door, her gentle face creased with worry. She adjusted her glasses, her hands fidgeting. She'd seen his vitals worsen, his heart rate erratic, but his stubbornness was as fierce as his illness. "Enough," Colton said, silencing the room. "This meeting's over. I'm not stepping down." He strode out, April trailing, her voice soft. "Mr. Hayes, you need to rest. Your heart—" "My heart's fine," he snapped, though his chest ached. "I've got a gala tonight. I'll manage." April sighed but didn't argue. Colton's world was one of control, but his body was betraying him, and the board's pressure was only the start. Blaine's ambition was clear. He wanted Hayes Global, and Colton's illness was his opening. What Colton didn't know was what Blaine was planning next, a move that would test his resolve. That evening, the city's elite gathered at a charity gala in a glittering hotel ballroom. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light over tables laden with champagne and delicacies. Colton stood near the bar, his tuxedo impeccable, masking the sweat beading on his brow. He forced a smile, shaking hands with investors, his charm a well-practiced shield. But his vision blurred, his pulse racing, a warning he ignored. Across the room, Brielle Monroe moved with quiet grace, balancing a tray of drinks. At 28, her caramel skin glowed under the soft lights, her warm brown eyes scanning the crowd. She worked at a wellness center, her days spent blending herbal remedies and counseling clients on holistic health. Tonight, she was a server, a side gig to cover her mother's rising rent. Her black uniform was simple, her curls pinned neatly, but her presence drew glances, her calm, her strength, a contrast to the room's polished chaos. Brielle's life was one of quiet sacrifice. Her mother, a former nurse, had taught her the power of natural remedies, a knowledge Brielle had honed into a gift. She'd seen pain in others, clients, strangers, and her intuition told her how to ease it. Tonight, though, her focus was survival. Keep the tray steady, avoid the entitled guests, get paid. As she offered a drink to a laughing heiress, her eyes caught Colton across the room. He was magnetic, his smile disarming, but she saw the strain, the way his hand gripped the bar, the shallow rise of his chest. She frowned, her instincts tingling. Something was wrong. "Careful, girl," a fellow server muttered, nudging her. "That's Colton Hayes, billionaire, untouchable." Brielle nodded, but her gaze lingered. Untouchable or not, he looked human, vulnerable. She moved closer, weaving through the crowd, her tray a shield. Then it happened. Colton's smile faltered, his knees buckled, and he collapsed, his glass shattering on the marble floor. Gasps erupted, the crowd parting like a wave. Brielle acted on instinct, dropping her tray and rushing to his side. She knelt, her hands hovering over him, her voice steady. "Mr. Hayes, can you hear me?" His eyes fluttered, his breathing ragged. The crowd pressed closer, phones flashing, but Brielle ignored them, her fingers finding his wrist. His pulse was erratic, dangerously fast. She pressed gently on a pressure point her mother had taught her, her touch calm but firm. "Breathe with me," she whispered. "Slow." To her surprise, his heart rate steadied, his eyes locking onto hers. There was a spark, an unspoken connection, as if her touch reached beyond his body to something deeper. His green eyes held pain, fear, but also a flicker of recognition. "Who are you?" he rasped. "Brielle," she said softly. "Just stay with me." Before he could respond, April pushed through, her nurse's bag in hand. "Move back," she barked, then froze, seeing Brielle. "You shouldn't be here, miss. You have no idea who that man is." Brielle met her gaze, unflinching. "Maybe I don't, but I know pain when I see it." April hesitated, then nodded, checking Colton's vitals. "He's stabilizing. Help's coming." Paramedics arrived and Brielle stepped back, her heart pounding. The crowd whispered, some eyeing her with suspicion, others with curiosity. She'd risked her job, her anonymity, but she couldn't have stood by. As Colton was wheeled away, his eyes found hers again, a question in them she couldn't answer. Later in the hospital, Colton lay in a private room, monitors beeping softly. April adjusted his fore, her voice gentle. "You scared us, Mr. Hayes. You can't keep pushing like this." He stared at the ceiling, his mind on Brielle, her warm brown eyes, her steady touch. "That woman, Brielle, she helped me." April frowned. "She's a server, not a doctor. You were lucky." "Lucky," he echoed, but it didn't feel like luck. Her touch had calmed his heart, eased a panic he'd never voiced. Who was she? And why did he feel like he'd known her forever? At the wellness center, Brielle sat in the break room, her shift over, her mind replaying the gala. She'd acted on impulse, but the connection with Colton, brief, intense, lingered. Her mother's voice echoed, "Your gift is in your hands, Brielle. Use it wisely." She'd always believed in natural remedies, in healing through touch and intuition, but this felt bigger. Could she help him? Did she dare try? Her phone buzzed, a text from her boss. "Gala organizers are asking about you. Be careful." Her stomach twisted. Had she drawn too much attention? And why did she feel like Colton's collapse was only the beginning? In his hospital room, Colton clutched a report April had slipped him, Blaine's latest board proposal, pushing for his removal. Blaine wasn't just a rival, he was a threat, and Colton's time was running out. But Brielle's face, her voice, stayed with him, a spark in his darkening world. What was her secret? And what was Blaine hiding, waiting to strike? Would you stand up to a room full of powerful people if you knew they were wrong? Comment yes if you believe in fighting for what's right. The gala's chaos, Colton Hayes' collapse, Brielle Monroe's instinctive rush to help, and the fleeting electric connection in their locked gazes had left an indelible mark on both. Her touch had steadied his erratic heart, her calm voice pulling him from panic, but the warning from her boss, "Be careful," echoed, hinting at consequences for drawing attention. Colton, now recovering in his hospital room, couldn't shake the memory of Brielle's warm brown eyes or the question of who she was. Blaine Rivers' push to oust him from Hayes Global loomed, a reminder of his dwindling time, but Brielle's presence felt like a lifeline, mysterious and vital. At the wellness center, Brielle wrestled with her own instincts, her mother's teachings about healing, the strange pull toward Colton, and a growing sense that her actions at the gala had set something larger in motion. 3 days after the gala, Brielle was blending chamomile and lavender at the wellness center, her hands steady but her mind restless. The memory of Colton's rasping, "Who are you?" and the way his heart had calmed under her touch haunted her. She'd always trusted her intuition, her ability to ease pain through pressure points and herbs, but this was different, deeper, almost fated. Her phone buzzed, an unknown number with a message. "Ms. Monroe, Colton Hayes requests your presence at his penthouse, 7 p.m. A car will be sent." Her heart skipped. Why her? And why now? She arrived at his skyscraper, a glass monolith piercing the Manhattan skyline. The penthouse was a study in luxury, marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist decor, but it felt cold, like a museum. Colton stood by the window, his dark hair tousled, his green eyes sharp despite the pallor of his skin. He wore a black sweater and slacks, less formal, but no less commanding. April, his nurse, hovered nearby, her expression wary as she showed Brielle in. "Thank you for coming," Colton said, his voice low, measured. He gestured to a leather couch. "Sit." Brielle sat, her simple navy dress a contrast to the opulence, her curls loose. She met his gaze, unflinching. "Why am I here, Mr. Hayes?" He didn't sit, pacing slightly, his hands in his pockets. "You helped me at the gala. My heart? It stabilized when you touched me. How?" She hesitated, choosing her words. "My mother taught me techniques, pressure points, ways to calm the body. It's not magic, just knowledge." His eyes narrowed, skeptical. "Knowledge no doctor has mentioned in 6 months of tests. You're a server, not a healer, yet you knew exactly what to do." "I've seen pain before," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I felt yours." He stopped pacing, his gaze piercing. "Everyone wants something from me. Money, power, a piece of my name. What's your price, Brielle?" The question stung, but she held his stare, her voice steady. "I don't want your money. I want you to live." He froze, her words cutting through his defenses. April, in the corner, glanced up, surprised. Colton's jaw tightened, doubt warring with curiosity. "Live," he said, his tone sharp. Doctors say I have 6 months. You think you can do better?" "I don't know," she admitted, her honesty disarming. "But I've helped people. Chronic pain, stress, heart issues, herbs, touch, diet. It's not a cure, but it's a chance, if you're willing." He laughed, a bitter sound. "A chance? I've had the best specialists in the world. You're telling me tea and hand-holding will save me?" Her eyes flashed, but she stayed calm. "I'm telling you, I've seen people fight when they had nothing left. You're still fighting, aren't you?" The room stilled, her words hitting a nerve. He leaned against the window, his breathing uneven. "You don't know me," he said, quieter now. "Why risk this? You could have walked away." "Because I can't ignore pain," she said, standing, her voice soft but resolute. "Not when I might help. But you have to trust me, Colton, and I don't think you trust anyone." His gaze softened, a flicker of vulnerability breaking through. "Trust is a luxury I can't afford. My board wants me out. My rivals want me dead, and my body's betraying me." "Then let me try," she said, stepping closer. "No strings, no price, just a chance." He studied her, the air between them charged. Her confidence, calm, unshakable, unnerved him. Why was she so sure? What did she know that his doctors didn't? "If I agree," he said, his voice low. "What's next?" "Meet me at the wellness center," she said. "Tomorrow. I'll show you what I mean." He nodded, a reluctant agreement, but his eyes held a question. "You're not afraid of me," he said, almost to himself. "Why?" She smiled faintly. "I'm not afraid of pain. I'm afraid of not trying." April cleared her throat, breaking the moment. "Mr. Hayes, you need rest. This meeting can wait." He waved her off, his gaze still on Brielle. "Tomorrow, then." As Brielle left, her heart raced. She'd stepped into his world, risking everything, her job, her safety, for a man she barely knew. But his pain, his fight, called to her gift. In the elevator, her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Stay away from Hayes. You'll regret it." Her blood chilled. Who knew she'd been here? Blaine? Someone else? In his penthouse, Colton stared at the city below. Brielle's words, "I want you to live," echoing. Her confidence was a mystery, a spark in his fading world. But Blaine's latest board maneuver, a whisper of a takeover, loomed. Was Brielle a savior or a distraction? And what secret did she hold, one that made her so certain she could help? The tense meeting in Colton Hayes' penthouse had left Brielle Monroe both exhilarated and uneasy. Her bold claim, "I don't want your money, I want you to live," had pierced Colton's guarded exterior, sparking a reluctant agreement to try her holistic methods. The mysterious threat on her phone, "Stay away from Hayes. You'll regret it," had heightened her sense of danger, suggesting someone, perhaps Blaine Rivers, was watching her. Colton's vulnerability, his admission that trust was a luxury he couldn't afford, echoed in her mind, deepening the strange connection they'd felt at the gala. As she left his skyscraper, Brielle's confidence in her healing gift warred with fear. Her involvement with Colton was drawing attention, and the stakes were higher than she'd imagined. The next morning, Brielle stood in the wellness center's small herb room, grinding dried chamomile and ashwagandha into a fine powder. The scent grounded her, a tether to her late mother, Celeste, whose teachings filled her hands and heart. Colton was due in an hour, their first session a test of her promise to help him live. Her confidence at the penthouse had surprised even her, but it wasn't blind. It came from a legacy she'd kept hidden, one that now felt like both a gift and a risk. Her mind drifted to a memory, vivid and sharp. 10 years ago, 16-year-old Brielle sat in their Harlem apartment, watching Celeste blend herbs at their kitchen table. Celeste, her caramel skin glowing, her brown eyes fierce, was a holistic healer. Her reputation whispered among those who sought alternatives to pills. One night, a sleek black car had pulled up, and a senator, pale, sweating, his heart failing, stumbled in. Doctors had given up, but Celeste hadn't. With teas of hawthorn and ginger, pressure point massages, and a diet overhaul, she'd stabilized him in weeks. The senator, tearful, had called her a miracle. Brielle, wide-eyed, had soaked in every move, learning the craft. But the miracle came with a cost. Weeks later, men in suits had visited, their voices low, threatening. "Your remedies threaten our patents," one said, naming a pharmaceutical giant. "Stop, or you'll lose everything." Celeste, defiant, continued in secret, teaching Brielle to guard their knowledge. "Big Pharma doesn't like what we do," she'd warned. "They'll bury us if they can." Celeste's death 2 years later, officially a car accident, had left Brielle with doubts she never voiced. She'd kept her mother's recipes locked in a journal, using them quietly at the wellness center, always cautious. Now, as Brielle prepared a tea blend for Colton, those warnings resurfaced. Her mother's methods, herbs, therapies, intuition, could ease his heart condition, but they carried a risk. If her treatments worked, they'd draw attention, possibly exposing the same corporate powers that had threatened Celeste. The text on her phone felt like a shadow of that past, a warning she couldn't ignore. Colton arrived, his presence filling the small room. His black coat was slung over one arm, his green eyes wary but curious. "This is your plan?" he asked, eyeing the mortar and pestle. "Tea and good vibes?" Brielle smiled, undeterred. "It's more than that. Sit." She handed him a steaming cup of hawthorn and lemon balm tea, its earthy scent calming. "Drink slowly. It supports your heart." He raised an eyebrow but sipped, his gaze never leaving her. "You're awfully sure of this," he said, his voice low. "Why?" She hesitated, her mother's warnings echoing. "I've seen it work," she said carefully. "People who were told they had no hope, they got better." He set the cup down, leaning forward. "You're holding something back. Nobody risks their job for a stranger without a reason. What's your secret, Brielle?" Her heart raced, but she met his gaze. "My mother was a healer. She taught me everything. But it's not a secret, it's just not common." His eyes narrowed, sensing her evasion. "Not common?" "You touched my wrist at the gala and my heart stopped racing. That's not just herbs." She swallowed, her hands tightening. "It's technique, pressure points, energy flow. I can't explain it in a lab, but it works." He leaned back, studying her. "You're asking me to bet my life on something you can't explain. That takes trust I don't have." "Then start small," she said, her voice steady. "Drink the tea. Let me try. If it doesn't work, you lose nothing." He held her gaze, the air between them charged. "And if it does?" "What then?" Her breath caught, the weight of his question heavy. "Then you live," she said softly. "And maybe we both find out why I was there that night." He nodded, a reluctant spark in his eyes. "All right. But I'm watching you, Brielle. Don't play games." "I'm not," she said, her voice firm. "I don't play with lives." As he sipped the tea, Brielle's mind raced. Her confidence came from her mother's success, but the senator's case had drawn threats, and Celeste's death still felt unresolved. If Colton's condition improved, her methods could attract the same enemies, pharma giants with billions at stake, or worse, someone closer like Blaine, whose boardroom maneuvers hid a deeper agenda. The text, "Stay away from Hayes," suggested surveillance, and she didn't know who to trust. Colton set the cup down, his voice softer. "You remind me of someone," he said. "My sister. She believed in people even when they didn't deserve it. She's gone now." Brielle's heart ached, his vulnerability a crack in his armor. "I'm sorry," she said, "but you're not gone." Not yet. He looked at her, a question in his eyes. Why do you care so much? Because I know what it's like to lose someone, she said, her voice thick. I won't let it happen if I can help. The moment stretched, their shared pain a quiet bridge. But as Brielle packed her herbs, her phone buzzed again. No number, just words. You're digging a grave. Stop now. Her blood chilled. Someone knew her plans, and the threat was escalating. Was it Blaine protecting his takeover, or a corporate shadow tied to her mother's past? And why did her confidence in healing Colton feel like a beacon, drawing danger closer? The next afternoon, Brielle stood at the wellness center's counter, labeling jars of lemon balm and ginseng. Her hands moved mechanically, but her mind was a storm. The second threatening text had kept her awake, its words a shadow of the men who'd intimidated Celeste years ago. She'd checked her mother's old journal last night, its pages filled with recipes and a single cryptic note. They'll come for us if we shine too bright. Helping Colton could expose her gift, risking the same corporate wrath that had silenced her mother. Was Blaine behind the texts, protecting his boardroom coup, or was it a bigger player tied to the pharma giants who'd feared Celeste's success? At Hayes Global's headquarters, Blaine Rivers sat in his sleek office, his silver hair gleaming under the light. His polished exterior hid a calculating mind, and Colton's refusal to step down had ignited his impatience. He'd learned of Brielle's involvement through a board member who'd attended the gala, whispering about the server who'd stabilized Colton's heart. Blaine's eyes narrowed as he opened a file on his desk, a grainy photo of Brielle from the event. A wellness worker, he muttered, his voice low. What's she playing at? He dialed a private number, his tone clipped. I need dirt on Brielle Monroe. Harlem, late 20s, works at a wellness center. Find everything. Family, finances, secrets. She's meddling with Hayes, and I want her gone. The investigator, a gruff voice on the line, confirmed, 2 weeks, Rivers. You'll have it. Blaine hung up, leaning back. Brielle was a wild card, her influence on Colton a threat to his takeover. If she was helping him, she could prolong his leadership, derailing Blaine's plans. Worse, her holistic methods, whispered about at the gala, could stir trouble. Blaine had ties to pharmaceutical firms, their donations lining his pockets. A healer like Brielle, if effective, could expose those firms' suppression of alternative treatments, a scandal he couldn't afford. He needed leverage to neutralize her, and fast. Back at the wellness center, Colton arrived for his second session, his presence quieter today, his green eyes searching. Brielle handed him a new blend, ginger and turmeric for inflammation, her voice calm despite her racing thoughts. This one's stronger, she said. It'll help with the chest pain. He took it, his fingers brushing hers, a spark in the contact. You're still sure, he said, not a question but a challenge. Even after yesterday. She met his gaze, her mother's strength in her spine. I'm sure because I've seen it work. My mother saved people doctors gave up on. I won't give up on you. His lips twitched, a faint smile. You're stubborn. Like me. Someone has to be, she said, her tone teasing but warm. She guided him to a chair, her fingers pressing gently on his wrist, checking his pulse. It was steadier than at the gala, a small victory. Close your eyes, she said. Breathe with me. He obeyed, his breathing syncing with hers, the room's tension easing. Her touch, precise yet gentle, worked pressure points along his arm, easing the tightness in his chest. For a moment they were just two people, not a billionaire and a healer, their connection a quiet bridge over their fears. But the peace was fleeting. As Brielle stepped back, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She ignored it, but Colton's eyes flicked open. Something wrong? He asked, his voice sharp. No, she lied, her heart pounding. She finished the session prescribing a diet of greens and lean proteins, but her mind was on the text she checked later. Last warning. Drop haze, or your mother's accident becomes your story. Her blood ran cold. The reference to Celeste's death, officially a car crash, felt like a knife. Someone knew too much, and they were closing in. At his penthouse, Colton felt lighter, Brielle's tea and touch easing his symptoms. But her guardedness, her vague answers about her mother, nagged at him. He called April, his nurse, into his office. "Check on Brielle Monroe," he said, discreetly. "I need to know who she is." April frowned, adjusting her glasses. "You don't trust her?" "I want to," he said, his voice low, "but I need to be sure." Unbeknownst to both, Blaine's investigator was already digging, uncovering Brielle's mother's past, her work with the senator, the pharma threats. If those secrets surfaced, they could expose illegal corporate dealings, implicating Blaine's allies. Brielle's confidence, her gift, was a beacon, but it was also a target. Who was behind the texts? Blaine protecting his empire, or a pharma giant repeating history? And what truth about Celeste's death was waiting to break Brielle's world apart? Have you ever been underestimated because of where you came from? Comment: never underestimate if you believe strength comes from the heart, not status. The chilling text: last warning. Drop haze or your mother's accident becomes your story, had shaken Brielle Monroe to her core, tying her efforts to help Colton Hayes to the mysterious threats that had silenced her mother Celeste years ago. Blaine Rivers's secret hiring of an investigator to dig into her past heightened the danger, suggesting his ties to pharmaceutical giants could be at play. Colton's reluctant trust in Brielle's holistic methods, her teas, her pressure point therapy, had steadied his heart condition slightly, but his probing questions and April's discreet inquiries into her background kept Brielle on edge. Their shared moment in the wellness center, his breathing syncing with hers, had deepened their connection. But the looming threats and Blaine's ambition to seize Hayes Global cast a shadow. Brielle's confidence in her gift was unwavering, but the cost of using it was becoming clearer. 2 weeks after their first session, Brielle arrived at Colton's penthouse for a late therapy session, her bag heavy with herbs and oils. A storm brewed outside, the Manhattan skyline shrouded in dark clouds. Colton had insisted on meeting here, citing a packed schedule, but his green eyes held a warmth that made her pulse quicken. "You're late," he teased, opening the door, his black sweater casual, his hair tousled. "Blame the rain," she said, setting up her supplies on his marble counter. "Sit. We're working on your chest tension tonight." He obeyed, his gaze following her as she mixed a rosemary and eucalyptus salve. Her hands worked his shoulders, pressing points to ease his pain, her touch both clinical and intimate. "You're good at this," he said, his voice low. "Too good." She smiled, but her heart raced, the latest text a weight she hadn't shared. "My mother was better," she said, deflecting. "Keep breathing." The session ran long, the storm intensifying, rain lashing the windows. As Brielle packed up, a crack of thunder shook the building, and the lights flickered out, plunging the penthouse into darkness. "Great," Colton muttered, standing. "Generators slow. Stay put." She froze, the dark amplifying her fear, of the threats, of her growing feelings. "I should go," she said, but her voice wavered. "You're not walking in this," he said, his silhouette moving closer. He lit a candle, its glow casting shadows across his face. "Stay, please." Her instinct was to flee, but his voice, soft, almost pleading, held her. They sat on the leather couch, the candle's light a small haven. The storm roared, but the silence between them was louder. "Tell me something real," he said suddenly, his eyes searching hers. "Not about herbs, about you." She hesitated, then let the truth spill. "I wanted to be a dancer," she said, her voice soft. when I was a kid. But Mom got sick and I had to grow up fast. Dreams don't pay bills. He nodded, his gaze distant. I wanted to build things, code that changed lives. Now I'm fighting to keep a boardroom from stealing it. Feels like I lost the dream somewhere. The vulnerability in his voice cracked her defenses. What do you regret most? She asked, her voice barely audible. He looked at her, raw. For years I've been surrounded by people, board members, investors, women. Yet I've never felt more alone than tonight, before you. Her breath caught, his confession a mirror to her own loneliness. I'm scared, she admitted, tears prickling. Helping you, it's bringing back things. My mom's death wasn't an accident. I think someone killed her for what she knew. His eyes widened, his hand reaching for hers. Brielle, why didn't you tell me? Because I'm still figuring it out, she said, her voice trembling. But I can't stop helping you. I feel you, Colton. Your pain, your fight. I can't walk away. He pulled her closer, his forehead against hers. I don't deserve you, he whispered, but I need you. Their lips met, a slow, desperate kiss, raw with fear and longing. The candle flickered as they sank into each other, their hands trembling, peeling away layers of doubt. I'm sorry, he murmured, his lips tracing her jaw, for not trusting you sooner. I'm here now, she whispered, tears falling, her fingers in his hair. Their clothes fell away, not in haste, but in reverence, each touch a promise to mend their brokenness. The storm raged outside, but their world was the warmth of skin, the rhythm of breaths, slow and intense. It was honest, two souls trusting fully, their fears laid bare in the dark. Her hands pressed his chest, feeling his heart, stronger, steadier, as they moved together, a quiet vow to face whatever came. After, they lay tangled in a blanket, the candle burned low, her head on his chest. You make me believe I can live, he said, his voice thick, his fingers tracing her arm. You will, she said, her voice fierce. But we're in this together now. He kissed her forehead, his arms tightening. No more secrets? None, she promised, but the text's threat. Your mother's accident becomes your story. Lingered, a shadow on their fragile peace. Blaine's investigator was closing in, digging into Celeste's past, and the pharma giant's secrets could surface if Brielle's methods worked. Who was watching them? And what truth about Celeste's death would test their newfound trust? The storm-lit night in Colton Hayes' penthouse, where Brielle Monroe and he had bared their souls and made love with raw, honest intensity, had forged a bond neither could deny. His confession, I've never felt more alone than tonight before you, and her admission about her mother Celeste's suspicious death had shattered their walls, uniting them against the threats looming over them. The anonymous texts, your mother's accident becomes your story, and Blaine Rivers' investigator digging into Brielle's past hinted at a dangerous connection to pharmaceutical giants who'd silenced Celeste. Brielle's healing sessions, easing Colton's heart condition with herbs and pressure points, were working, but the risk of exposure grew. As they lay together, promising no more secrets, the shadow of Blaine's ambition and the pharma threats loomed, threatening to tear apart their fragile trust. A week after their night together, Brielle arrived at the wellness center, her heart lighter despite the lingering fear of the texts. Colton's latest session had shown progress, his chest pain had lessened, his energy returning, and their stolen moments, soft kisses and whispered hopes, had deepened her resolve. She blended a new tea, ginseng and licorice for stamina, her mother's journal open beside her. Celeste's words, they'll come for us if we shine too bright, felt like a prophecy now, but Brielle couldn't stop. Colton was living, not just surviving, and that was worth the risk. At Hayes Global, Blaine Rivers sat in his office, a manila folder from his investigator on his desk. The contents were a fabrication, A carefully crafted lie. Doctored photos of Brielle selling miracle cures to desperate clients, forged receipts tying her to a scam wellness ring, and a fake article claiming she'd conned a wealthy widow years ago. Blaine's lips curled into a cold smile. The investigator had found little real dirt. Celeste's work with the senator, the pharma threats, but fiction was more useful. If this scandal broke, it would discredit Brielle, alienate Colton, and clear Blaine's path to seize the company. He leaked the file to a tabloid contact, ensuring anonymity. By noon, the media exploded. Headlines screamed, "Billionaire CEO duped by fake healer," and "Wellness worker cons dying tycoon with bogus cures." Social media buzzed, doctored images of Brielle circulating, her caramel-skinned face plastered across screens. Reporters swarmed the wellness center, cameras flashing as Brielle arrived for her shift. She froze, her heart pounding, as a reporter shoved a microphone in her face. "Ms. Monroe, are you scamming Colton Hayes? What's your real motive?" "No comment," she said, pushing through, her voice steady but her hands trembling. Inside, her co-workers stared, some whispering, others avoiding her eyes. Her boss, a wiry woman named Lena, pulled her aside. "Brielle, this is bad. The center's getting calls. You need to go home." "I didn't do this," Brielle said, her voice fierce. "Someone's lying." "Then figure it out," Lena said, her tone sympathetic but firm. "But not here." Brielle's phone buzzed, another text from the unknown number. "Told you to stop. Now you pay." Her blood chilled. This wasn't just a smear, it was a coordinated attack tied to the threats against her mother. Blaine? The pharma giants? She needed to warn Colton, but as she stepped outside, 2 security guards from Hayes Global blocked her path. "Ms. Monroe," one said, his voice cold, "you're needed at headquarters. Now." At Hayes Global, Colton sat in his penthouse office, his face pale, a tablet open to the tabloid headlines. The doctored photos, Brielle with supposed clients, her hands on their wallets, cut like a knife. He'd trusted her, let her into his heart, his bed, only to see this. Blaine stood nearby, his expression grave but his eyes gleaming. "I'm sorry, Colton," he said, his voice smooth. "I warned you about outsiders. She played you." Colton's chest ached, not from his illness but from betrayal. "Get her here," he said, his voice low, dangerous. "I want to hear it from her." Brielle was escorted into the office, the guards flanking her like she was a criminal. Her navy dress was wrinkled, her curls loose, but her chin was high, her warm brown eyes defiant. The room was silent, the city skyline a cold backdrop through the glass walls. April in the corner looked stricken, her hands fidgeting. Colton stood, his green eyes dark with pain. "Is it true?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "The scams, the cons? Did you use me?" Brielle's heart broke, his doubt a mirror of her worst fears. "No," she said, her voice steady. "Those stories are lies. I've only ever wanted to help you." He slammed the tablet on the desk, the headlines glaring. "Help me, or help yourself to my money. I trusted you, Brielle. I let you in and you played me." The words stung, tears prickling her eyes, but she held his gaze. "You think I'd risk everything, my job, my safety, for a con? I told you about my mother, my gift. I've been honest, Colton. You're the one who's choosing to believe lies." Blaine stepped forward, his voice oily. "Enough, Ms. Monroe. You've caused enough damage. Security, escort her out." Brielle's eyes flicked to Blaine, her suspicion flaring. His smugness, the timing, it was too perfect. "You're behind this," she said, her voice low. "You want him weak, don't you?" Blaine's smile didn't waver. "Paranoid accusations won't help you." Colton's face hardened, his doubt winning. "Get out, Brielle," he said, his voice breaking. "I can't do this." She stood tall, her heart shattering but her dignity intact. She said nothing, her silence louder than words, and turned, the guards trailing as she walked to the elevator. The doors closed, her tears falling only then, the weight of betrayal crushing. She'd lost him, but worse, she'd lost the chance to save him. The texts, the scandal. Someone had orchestrated this, and Blaine's face loomed in her mind. What did he know about her mother's death? And what would he do next to ensure Colton's downfall? In his office, Colton sank into his chair, his chest tight, his heart racing. April approached, her voice gentle. "Mr. Hayes, you didn't see her eyes. She wasn't lying." He didn't respond, his gaze on the tablet, doubt and regret warring. Blaine clapped his shoulder, too familiar. "You did the right thing, Colton. Focus on the company now." But as Blaine left, Colton's eyes fell on a small vial of Brielle's tea, left from their last session. Her voice, "I want you to live," echoed, and a seed of doubt took root. Had he been wrong? Was Blaine manipulating him? And what truth about Brielle's past was worth this elaborate lie, a truth that could destroy them both? The fabricated scandal that painted Brielle Monroe as a con artist had torn her from Colton Hayes' life, leaving a wound neither could ignore. His whispered betrayal, "I trusted you, and you played me," and her silent, dignified exit from his office had shattered their fragile trust. The media storm, orchestrated by Blaine Rivers' investigator, had discredited her holistic methods, but Brielle's parting accusation, "You're behind this," pointed to Blaine's manipulation. Colton's doubt, fueled by doctored photos and Blaine's oily assurances, had blinded him to her truth, while Brielle's tears in the elevator carried the weight of her lost chance to save him. The anonymous threats, "Your mother's accident becomes your story," linked to her mother Celeste's death, suggested a deeper conspiracy, possibly tied to Blaine's pharmaceutical allies. As Colton clung to his empire, his heart condition worsening, a flicker of doubt about Brielle's guilt gnawed at him, but pride and pain kept him silent. In the days following Brielle's exit, Colton's world darkened. His penthouse, once a symbol of his success, felt like a mausoleum, its marble floors cold under his unsteady steps. His heart condition, briefly eased by Brielle's tease and touch, flared with a vengeance. Chest pain, shortness of breath, dizzy spells that left him gripping furniture. April, his nurse, hovered with increasing urgency, her gentle voice strained. "Mr. Hayes, you need a hospital," she said one morning, checking his pulse. "Your vitals are crashing." "I'm fine," he snapped, his voice weaker than he intended. He wasn't fine. The board, led by Blaine, was tightening its grip, scheduling an emergency vote to force his resignation. The media frenzy over Brielle's scam had painted him as a fool, eroding investor confidence. But worse was the emptiness gnawing at his core. Brielle's absence, her warm brown eyes, her steady presence, left a void no wealth could fill. He avoided the wellness center, her tease, her memory, but her voice haunted him. "I want you to live." The vial of hawthorn tea on his desk, untouched since their fight, was a silent rebuke. April's words, "She wasn't lying," echoed, but he'd chosen Blaine's lies over Brielle's truth. His pride, his fear of betrayal, had cost him the one person who'd seen him, not his empire. Late at night, alone with the city's hum, he wondered, had he destroyed his only chance at life, at love? At the wellness center, Brielle buried herself in work, blending herbs with mechanical precision. The scandal had cost her clients, her reputation, but she held her head high, her mother's strength in her spine. The threatening texts had stopped, but the silence was worse, a predator waiting to strike. Her mother's journal, with its recipes and cryptic warnings about pharma giants, was her anchor. Celeste's death, officially a car accident, felt like a cover-up, and the scandal's timing suggested someone, Blaine or his allies, knew too much. She wanted to fight, to clear her name, but Colton's betrayal, "You played me," cut deepest. She'd loved him, trusted him, and he'd turned away. Her boss, Lena, approached one evening, her face soft. "Brielle, take a break. You're killing yourself." "I'm okay," Brielle lied, her hands shaking as she sealed a jar. She wasn't okay. She missed Colton, his stubborn fight, his rare smiles, and the thought of his health failing without her was a knife in her chest. But he'd made his choice, and she had to protect herself, her mother's legacy. Colton's health plummeted further, forcing him to retreat to his upstate mansion, a sprawling estate he rarely used. The isolation suited his mood, dark, heavy, final. April stayed, her care relentless, but his condition defied her efforts. One stormy night, as rain lashed the windows, he wandered the mansion's library, his breath shallow, his vision blurring. He hadn't slept in days, his dreams haunted by Brielle's tearful eyes, her silent exit. On a desk, buried under papers, he found a small envelope, his name scrawled in her neat handwriting. His heart stuttered, not from illness, but from dread. He opened it, unfolding a letter she must have left during a session, before the scandal. Her words were simple, piercing. "Colton, you were never my project. You were my prayer. I saw your pain, your fight, and I believed in you, not your money, not your name. If you ever doubt, know this. My heart is with you, even if you can't see it." Brielle. His knees buckled, and he sank to the floor, the letter trembling in his hands. Tears, rare and unbidden, burned his eyes. She'd loved him, not his wealth, and he'd thrown it away. The doctored photos, the headlines, they were lies, and he'd believed them, choosing Blaine's manipulation over her truth. Her prayer, her belief in him, had been the only real thing in his life, and he'd destroyed it. "God, what have I done?" he whispered, his voice breaking. He clutched the letter, his sobs raw, echoing in the empty room. The mansion, his empire, meant nothing without her. He saw it now, her touch at the gala, her tease, her fierce, "I want you to live." She'd been fighting for him, while he'd been fighting ghosts. Blaine's smug face flashed in his mind, the board's pressure, the scandal's precision. It wasn't just a smear, it was a trap, and he'd fallen into it, pushing away the woman who'd given him hope. April found him, her gasp soft as she knelt beside him. "Mr. Hayes, you're not well. Let me—" "No," he said, his voice hoarse. "I need her, April. I need Brielle." She touched his shoulder, her eyes sad. "Then find her. But you need to rest first, or you won't make it." He nodded, the letter still in his hand, but his body betrayed him. His chest tightened, pain radiating, and he slumped against the desk, his vision fading. April called for help, her voice urgent, but Colton's thoughts were on Brielle, her prayer, her love. He'd hit rock bottom, his health, his heart, his empire crumbling. The realization that he'd destroyed the only real thing he'd ever had was a wound deeper than any illness. At the wellness center, Brielle locked up for the night, her mother's journal tucked in her bag. A news alert flashed on her phone. Colton Hayes hospitalized, condition critical. Her heart stopped, fear and love surging. He was dying, and she wasn't there. The scandal, the threats, none of it mattered if he didn't survive. But the texts, Blaine's shadow, and the pharma giant's secrets loomed. If she went to him, she'd risk everything, her safety, her mother's legacy. Yet, her prayer for him, written in that letter, was still true. In the hospital, Colton drifted in and out, the letter clutched in his hand. April sat by his bed, her voice soft. "She loved you, you know. You can still fix this." But Blaine was moving, his board vote looming, and his investigator had found a new lead, Celeste's journal, mentioned in old community records. If it surfaced, it could expose Pharma's illegal threats, implicating Blaine's allies. What was Blaine planning to keep Colton down? And would Brielle risk the danger to save the man she still loved? Knowing the truth about her mother's death might destroy them both. The crushing weight of Brielle Monroe's letter, "You were never my project. You were my prayer," had brought Colton Hayes to his knees in his mansion's library, his health failing and his heart broken by his own betrayal. The fabricated scandal, orchestrated by Blaine Rivers, had driven Brielle out of his life, and his belief in the lies, "You played me," had destroyed the only real love he'd known. His collapse, the hospital, and April's quiet urging to fix this couldn't erase the truth. He'd chosen doubt over Brielle's devotion. Meanwhile, Brielle, reeling from the news of Colton's critical condition, was torn between her love for him and the escalating threats tied to her mother Celeste's suspicious death. Blaine's investigator, closing in on Celeste's journal, threatened to expose pharmaceutical giants' illegal actions, putting Brielle in greater danger. As Colton clung to life, clutching her letter, the question loomed. Could he undo the damage before it was too late, and would Brielle risk everything to face him again? In the sterile hospital room, Colton drifted in and out of consciousness, the monitor's beeps a grim metronome. His heart condition, unchecked without Brielle's treatments, was winning, but her letter, crumpled in his hand, was a lifeline. April sat beside him, her face etched with worry. "You can't give up, Mr. Hayes," she said, adjusting his IV. "She's out there, and she needs you to fight." Colton's eyes fluttered open, his voice weak. "I broke her, April. How do I fix that?" "Start with the truth," she said, her voice firm. "You know who's behind this. Stop them." The truth was Blaine Rivers. The scandal, the doctored photos, the media storm. It all pointed to his ambition to seize Hayes Global. Colton's doubt had been Blaine's weapon, but the letter had cleared his vision. Brielle had loved him, risked everything for him, and he'd let lies tear them apart. He gripped the letter, a fire igniting despite his frailty. He wouldn't die like this, not without her. Days later, against April's protests, Colton discharged himself, his body weak but his resolve ironclad. Back at Hayes Global, he summoned the board to the glass-walled conference room. Blaine sat at the head, his silver hair gleaming, his smile smug. The other members, executives who'd backed Blaine's push to oust him, shifted uneasily as Colton entered, leaning on a cane, his green eyes blazing. "You're all fired," Colton said, his voice low but lethal. "Every one of you." Gasps rippled. Blaine stood, his face reddening. "You're delirious, Hayes. You can't—" "I can," Colton cut in, slamming a folder on the table. Evidence of Blaine's leaked emails, his payments to the investigator, his ties to pharma firms. "You fabricated the scandal, smeared Brielle Monroe to weaken me. You're done, Blaine. Security's waiting." Blaine's composure cracked, his voice rising. "You'll tank the company. Investors won't stand for this." "Then they can leave," Colton said, unflinching. "I built this from nothing. I'll rebuild it without traitors." Security escorted Blaine out, his threats echoing, but Colton wasn't finished. He called his PR team, canceling every media deal tied to the scandal, issuing a public statement. "Brielle Monroe is innocent. The lies against her were my failure to stop. I'm correcting that now." The statement went viral, clearing her name, but Colton knew it wasn't enough. He had to find her. He hired a private investigator, not Blaine's lackey, but a trusted firm, to track Brielle. She'd left the wellness center, vanished from New York, her trail cold. Weeks turned to months, his health stabilizing slightly with medication, but nowhere near the hope Brielle's treatments had given him. The emptiness without her was a different kind of illness, one no doctor could cure. He scoured her old haunts, called her former co-workers, but she was a ghost, her absence a punishment he deserved. 6 months later, in New Orleans, Brielle worked at a free clinic in the 9th Ward, her caramel skin glowing under the humid sun. She'd fled New York after the scandal, the threats. Your mother's accident becomes your story, too close to Celeste's unresolved death. The clinic was her refuge, a place to use her mother's remedies quietly, herb teas for elders, pressure points for kids with asthma. Her curls were tied back, her scrubs simple, but her warm brown eyes carried a quiet strength. She hadn't forgotten Colton, his betrayal, his love, but she'd buried it to survive. The news of his public apology, his firing of the board, had reached her, but the pain of his doubt kept her distant. Her days were filled with patience, her nights with Celeste's journal, its recipes a comfort, its warnings a reminder. The threats had stopped, but she knew better than to trust the silence. Blaine's downfall, reported in the papers, hadn't erased the pharma giant's shadow. If they'd killed Celeste, they could come for her. Yet, every patient she helped was a defiance of that fear, a tribute to her mother's legacy. One humid afternoon, the clinic was packed, mothers with feverish children, elders with joint pain. Brielle moved between them, her hands gentle, her voice soothing. A murmur rippled through the waiting room, heads turning. She looked up, and her heart stopped. Colton stood in the doorway, leaner, paler, his black coat dusted with travel, his green eyes locked on her. The room faded, her pulse racing as memories flooded, his touch, his betrayal, her letter. He stepped forward, the crowd parting, his cane gone but his steps deliberate. The clinic staff stared, recognizing him from headlines, but Colton didn't flinch. He reached her, his voice low, raw. "Brielle." She froze, her hands clutching a vial of lavender oil, her voice tight. "What are you doing here?" He didn't answer, dropping to his knees before her, his head bowed. Gasps echoed, phones raised, but his eyes never left hers. "I don't want a cure anymore," he said, his voice breaking. "I want you. Please forgive me." Tears prickled her eyes, her throat burning. The clinic was silent, every eye on them. "You believed them," she said, her voice trembling. "You thought I was a liar." "I was wrong," he said, his hands shaking. "I let fear, Blaine, the lies, everything, blind me. Your letter, it broke me, Brielle. You were my prayer and I destroyed it. I fired the board, ended the media deals, cleared your name, but none of it matters if I don't have you." Her heart ached, love and pain warring. "I risked everything for you," she said, tears falling. "My mother's secrets, my safety, and you turned away." "I know," he said, his voice thick. "I'll spend my life making it right. I love you, Brielle. Not for your gift, but for you. Your heart, your fight. Come back to me." The crowd murmured, some recording, others crying. Brielle's hands trembled, Celeste's voice echoing. "Your gift is a light, but it draws shadows." She'd fled to protect herself, but Colton's kneeling, his public vulnerability, was a light of its own. She saw him now, not the billionaire, but the man who'd bared his soul in a storm, who'd fought to find her. She stepped forward, her hand cupping his face, her touch gentle. "Get up," she whispered, her voice soft but firm. "I'm not done with you yet." He rose, hope flickering in his eyes, and pulled her into his arms, their embrace fierce, unyielding. The crowd cheered, but for Brielle and Colton it was just them, two souls reuniting after a brutal fall. "I'm so sorry," he murmured into her hair, his voice thick. "I know," she said, her tears soaking his shirt. "But we're not safe yet." He pulled back, his eyes searching. "The threats." She nodded, her voice low. "They're tied to my mother's death. Pharma may be Blaine's allies. We need to find the truth. I'm with you, he said, his voice fierce. No more running. As they stood hand in hand, the clinic's energy shifted, patients clapping, staff smiling. But Brielle's journal, hidden in her bag, held secrets that could still unravel everything. Proof of Pharma's threats, Celeste's death. Blaine was gone, but his investigators' last report, now in unknown hands, loomed. Who held it? And what would they do to keep Brielle's gift buried? Do you believe people deserve second chances? Drop "forgiveness heals" in the comments if you believe love can heal even the deepest wounds. The reunion in the New Orleans clinic, where Colton Hayes knelt before Brielle Monroe and begged for forgiveness. I don't want a cure anymore. I want you, had mended their broken bond, forging a vow to face the threats together. His public apology, firing the board and dismantling the media, lies had cleared Brielle's name, but the shadow of her mother Celeste's death and the anonymous threats, "Your mother's accident becomes your story," lingered. The pharmaceutical giants, possibly tied to Blaine River's allies, and the missing investigators' report on Celeste's journal hinted at a deeper conspiracy. Brielle's tentative, "We're not safe yet," and Colton's fierce, "I'm with you," marked a new chapter, one where their love would be tested by the truth they sought. As they stood hand in hand, the clinic's cheers fading, Brielle knew her gift, her mother's healing legacy, was both their strength and their danger. In the weeks following their reunion, Brielle and Colton returned to New York, their resolve a quiet fire. Colton's health, though fragile without Brielle's treatments, stabilized under her care, daily teas of hawthorn and ginger, pressure point sessions, and a diet of fresh greens. The penthouse, once a cold fortress, warmed with her presence, jars of herbs lining the counters, her soft humming filling the silences. But the city's pulse, its greed, its scrutiny, felt suffocating. The media, though kinder after Colton's statement, still hovered, and the threat of the investigators' report loomed, its whereabouts unknown. Brielle sat with Colton one evening, her mother's journal open between them. Its pages, filled with recipes and warnings about Pharma's threats, were a map to the danger. "If we stay here," she said, her voice steady, "they'll find us. Whoever killed my mother, they're still out there." Colton took her hand, his green eyes fierce. "Then we leave, start over. Somewhere they can't touch us." She looked at him, her heart swelling but cautious. "I'll come with you," she said, her voice firm, "but on one condition. We live by our values. No greed, no games. Just us, helping people, the way my mother did." He nodded, a smile breaking through. "No empires, no boardrooms, just you and me." They began planning, their vision taking shape, a wellness retreat, far from the city's claws, where Brielle could use her gift freely, and Colton could rebuild his life on truth, not wealth. He sold Hayes Global to a trusted partner, funneling the profits into a trust for the retreat. The decision shocked the business world, but Colton was done with its games. Brielle, meanwhile, pored over Celeste's journal, decoding remedies and preparing for a life where her mother's legacy could shine without fear. 6 months later, they stood on a small farm in Vermont, its rolling hills dotted with wildflowers, a weathered barn their new home. The air was crisp, the silence a balm after New York's chaos. Brielle, in a simple linen dress, her curls loose, walked the fields, planting lavender and chamomile. Colton, his strength returning, carried lumber for the retreat's cabins, his skin tanned, his cane long gone. Her treatments had worked, his heart condition, once a death sentence, was gone, his vitals normal, his energy vibrant. Doctors called it a miracle. Brielle called it love and persistence. The retreat, named Celeste's Haven, opened quietly, welcoming those who couldn't afford traditional care, single mothers, elders, veterans. Brielle taught workshops on herbal remedies, her hands guiding patients through pressure point therapy, her warm brown eyes a beacon of hope. Colton, no longer a CEO but a partner, handled logistics, his coding skills repurposed for a patient database. Their days were long but fulfilling, their nights spent on the porch, wrapped in blankets, the stars their only audience. The threats had faded, the investigators' report never surfacing, but Brielle kept Celeste's journal locked in a safe, its secrets a reminder of the cost of shining too bright. Blaine Rivers, disgraced and bankrupted, had vanished, and the pharma giant's silence suggested they'd moved on. Yet, Brielle and Colton stayed vigilant, their love a shield against any shadow. One golden evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, they walked through the retreat's garden, its paths lined with blooming sage and rosemary. Colton, barefoot in jeans and a linen shirt, his dark hair tousled, stopped by a willow tree, his hand slipping into his pocket. Brielle, in a sundress, her curls catching the light, turned to him, her smile curious. "What's that look?" she asked, her voice teasing. He took her hands, his green eyes soft, vulnerable. "Brielle Monroe," he said, his voice thick. "You didn't just heal my body. You healed my soul. You saw me when I was nothing but pride and pain, and you gave me a life I never dreamed of." Her breath caught, tears prickling as he knelt, pulling out a simple silver ring, its band etched with tiny leaves. "I don't want a day without you," he said, his voice breaking. "Will you marry me?" She laughed, tears streaming, joy and love overwhelming her. "Yes," she said, pulling him up, her hands cupping his face. "Yes, Colton." They kissed, slow and deep, the sunset bathing them in gold, the garden their witness. Her laughter mingled with sobs, his arms tight around her. Their love a quiet triumph over every storm, Blaine's betrayal, the pharma threats, Celeste's shadow. "I love you," she whispered, her forehead against his, "for who you are, not what you were." "And I love you," he murmured, "for showing me what matters." They stood, wrapped in each other, the retreat's soft hum, patient's laughter, the rustle of leaves, a backdrop to their new beginning. The journal's secrets, the unanswered questions about Celeste's death, were locked away, but their life was proof of her legacy. They'd built a haven, not just for themselves, but for those who needed it most, their values, love, truth, healing, at its core. As night fell, they sat in the garden, her head on his shoulder, the stars bright above. "We did it," she said, her voice soft. "Celeste would be proud." "She is," he said, kissing her temple. "And I'm proud of you." Their future stretched before them, more patience, more healing, a wedding under the willow tree. The pharma giants, Blaine's allies, might still lurk, but Brielle and Colton were ready, their love a light no shadow could dim. Celeste's haven was their legacy, a testament to a simple woman's gift and a billionaire's redemption, proof that love and courage could rewrite any story. If you made it this far, you believe in miracles. Comment, miracles exist, if you believe that love, faith, and forgiveness are stronger than anything else. Thank you for staying with us through this beautiful story of hope, forgiveness, and love.